Hello and welcome to another video. In this one, we're going to be talking about some more interview tips, and in particular, this is about your story. During interviewing, you're going to be asked about your previous background in programming, and it is very important to have your answer to that question prepared up front. Now, you're going to be asked this in several different scenarios, and your answer should actually be different in those different scenarios. The first is the long form of your story, where you want to highlight, you know, everything that you've worked on, the important parts, what you're passionate about, all sorts of things like that, and broadly go over at least the last couple of places that you've worked at, if you have a couple of places that you worked at. And this version of the story question is one that you're going to answer in two scenarios. The first is during your recruiter screen, where you are being interviewed by usually a non-technical individual who is trying to figure out your background and figure out a place where you would fit well in the company. And so they're trying to get signals based on the type of work that you've done in the past. They might be looking for, if you mention infrastructure or if you mention front end or things like that. They're looking for you to talk about yourself and the things that you've worked on and try and gauge an idea for what sort of levels and what sort of types of work you're looking for. The other case where you'll use your full story is when you're being asked about your background in like a manager screen, where you're working or where you're interviewing with a manager and they're asking you about what you've done in the past and what accomplishments you've had. And in this case, again, you're going to use that sort of long form description of what you've done in the past. Now, you don't want to use that in any of the other scenarios. So one common thing that'll happen when an interview starts, let's say this is a technical interview, either like a programming interview or a design or some similar technical interview. What will almost always happen is at the beginning of the interview, the interviewer will say like, is this a good time for the interview, blah, 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 trying to make sure you don't have to use the restroom or get water or something like that. But then the next thing that they'll follow up with is usually, tell me a little bit about yourself. And in this situation, your answer really doesn't matter all that much. Most of the time, they are not actually even paying attention to this or recording it. The reason that they ask you to talk about yourself is to make yourself more comfortable in the interview setting. Get yourself talking and, try and shake out some of your jitters or nervousness. And in this situation, you don't want to tell them the full story because you are using up time that you'll want to use later when you're actually implementing your programming problem or your software design or something like that. So you want to have a short version of this question and a long form version of this question. And usually your short version, I like to limit it to, significantly less than 5 minutes. I usually try and aim for about, 1 or 2 minutes. Like my description for my short one might be, I previously worked at Lyft, where I started on a production engineering team servicing both development and prod. I haven't practiced mine in a while, so you can see I'm a little rusty. And after that, I transitioned to building a developer experience organization, where we scaled from having 2 engineers to a team of 20 or 30. And yeah, that would be kind of my short answer for where are you from, what do you work on. Whereas the long form, I would probably go into details, talk about particular projects that I worked on, technologies that I used. I'd probably go further back in history, talk about like, I originally started as a front-end developer and realized that it's really hard for me to get my job done as a front-end developer by just doing front-end because I had to wait for some back-end engineer to implement something for me. So I transitioned to more of a full-stack engineer where I could unblock myself and blah, blah, blah. And so, have a more long form version of your story that you'll tell in other scenarios where you need to elaborate on stuff and where it actually matters for the interview. I have unfortunately seen candidates not recognize this dichotomy and spend a significant amount of time explaining their backstory when I don't care. I just want to make you comfortable and like get you in a situation where you're ready to speak out loud and not be super jittery about it, and then move on to the actual technical portion of the interview where I actually test you for what I'm looking for. But yeah, make sure you have those both prepared because you'll be asked it in different, or you'll be asked the same question, but you'll have different answers in different scenarios. Anyway, hopefully this was helpful. If there are additional things you would like me to explain, leave a comment below or reach out to me on the various platforms. But thank you all for watching, and I will see you in the next one.